This is a lecture for IB Microeconomics, only for higher level. So today I will cover the chapter only for HL students, which is production and cost. I mean, actually it's theory of the firm and the market structure, but the section is the production and cost. So let's see the next. So we first review some basic concepts before we cover this part. So first you need to know what is factors of production, or input, or revenue, variables. So factors of production can also considered to be variables. Yes. So we have 4 factors of production or 4 inputs. So the first thing is land. Land can be considered to be natural resources usually. So you can see some definitions, but land is just land, sorry, skip to the next. So labor is actually quite important. So you should draw 3 stars for labors. So labor is usually related to the human capital. So like human effort, I said, or talent, but usually it is about human capital. So in order to accumulate the human capital, what we usually do is by education or by job training, as known as on-the-job training. So on-the-job training, or you can say OJT. Yeah. You will see this term for supply side policy in IB macroeconomics as well. And the third one is capital, which is one of the most important thing as well. So you should draw 5 stars. So capital is not related to the money itself. So capital is not related to money, but it is related to the equipment that you use to produce something. So I said man-made equipment. So I gave some of the examples here, machinery, buildings, roads, but they are not really important. So I will give you an example of computers. So if teachers use computer, then that computer is considered to be capital goods, because teachers can produce service that education to students by using computers. However, if computers are used by students, then computers should be considered to be consumer goods. Oh my gosh. So we have 2 different types of goods. The first thing is capital goods, and we have consumer goods. So the big difference is whether the goods can be used for a production process. So capital goods is like the teacher use computer, that case. In that case, computer should be considered to be capital goods. But if you guys, students, use computers, then you guys do not give any service, right? In that case, the computer should be considered to be consumer goods. So that's the big difference between capital goods and consumer goods. And last one, we have entrepreneurship, but which is not really important for economics major. If you want to major in business, you will usually think about this, how to manage risk, things like that. So let's move on. So now we will start the first idea of the production and cost section, which is the difference between short run and long run. Actually, this is quite a tricky part, because usually if you think about the short run and the long run, what you guys have in your mind is it is something related to the period of time. However, it is not true. As I mentioned here, the difference between the long run and the short run is not related to how long it is, the time is. So what you need to know is which factors really be fixed and changed during the time, and this is the deciding factor of the short run or long run. So first, the short run, the definition is at least one input is fixed. That is the most important thing, and I recommend you guys to highlight this part. But for the long run, every variable can be changed, every input. So So I mentioned all inputs can be changed. So we have covered inputs, 4 types of input. The first thing is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, right? Capital should be abbreviated to K, the letter K, not the letter C, because of the German. If you guys know German, it's capital, so we say das Kapital. It's not important, so skip it. So in short version, you guys can fix land, right? Of course we can fix land. The reason is that, for example, you guys have your own company, your own factory, and you guys are producing computers, right? Then, if you already constructed your own factory in Dongguan, for example, then do you think you can change the land easily to make a different factory? It's impossible. It's really hard to change it with a short period of time. In that case, you need to have a new contract or some different kind of land, right? You should search for different sites. You should make a new contract with other people, and that's really hard. And that's the reason why it's hard to move your company to other places. Therefore, land is usually fixed in short term, and for others, it can be changed usually easily. For example, labor. If you guys are CEO of one company, of your own company, then you guys can easily decide whether Haley is the right person for your company or Alvin is the right person for your company. If Alvin produces very well, then you don't want him laid off, right? But if Haley sucks, then you guys want to fire her because she does nothing for your own company. In that case, you guys can decide to fire him or lay off. And that's the reason why I say, usually in short run, labor is changing very easily. How about capital? Computers, for example. Okay, in our school, we can easily decide whether Mr. Chi should have MacBook or Mr. People should have MacBook or Windows laptop, things like that, right? And it's easily decided, and that's the reason why we say capital is considered to be short-lived factors. I mean, because they are usually changing easily, right? But how about entrepreneurship? You guys don't need to know that, so I'll just skip it. Okay, let's move on. So now we covered the difference between short run and long run, and now you guys need to know the production, which we have 3 different things. The first thing is total product, which is just the quantity of the total output. So it's not really hard. So Q is Q. The TP is just Q. Okay, TP is just Q. How about average productive labor? So I mentioned of labor, but you guys can skip this if it makes you confused. So average product is just the average of the total product. So we have the total product, and we want to find out the average of this. Then we should divide TP by the one that we have for our input. Again, quantity is output, right? And we have input. And input in this case is labor. That is the reason why we should divide by the total quantity divide total quantity by the labor. So we can find out how much each person can produce for your company. Okay. Also, labor can be changed to other input, such as capital. So I already give you some example. So I mentioned computers as an example, right, for before. And usually, if you want to find out how much you can produce by giving one computer to teachers, an education, how much students does the teacher can help, you can decide very easily, even with computer itself, not with the teachers, not with the number of teachers. So that's the reason why we can use average product of capital as well. Usually it is not seen in paper 3 exam, but mostly it is about the labor, but in some cases, like if you guys want to take AP microeconomics exam, you should know this in your mind, kind of. And I want to remark this again. This is extremely important because you guys are not really familiar with the term marginer. The term marginer is very special in economics. You guys already learned this before for marginal benefit or marginal cost. So if you draw the demand supply curve, which is price, which is quantity, and if you draw demand and supply curve is considered to be MC curve, right? And demand curve should be considered to be MB curve. So we now know this is marginal cost and this is marginal benefit. But what is marginal product? In fact, the term marginal means extra or additional. And this is the one you should understand very carefully. So marginal here is extra or additional. So this means that when the when the input is added by 1, so when input is increased by 1, you guys want to know how much product is produced when one input is increased. So here is a formula to find out the marginal product of labor. So first you guys need to know the TP1, which is TP after, I would say, and this is TP before. And this is labor after, and this is labor before. Because you guys are not perhaps familiar with mathematical notation, I will give you some example. So, as an example, I will introduce computer again. Not computer. Okay, our school's teacher, okay? So, for example, our teachers can teach 10 students. So we now have 5 teachers in our school. And with 5 teachers, they can teach 200 students. It's ideal case. This is case 1. Okay, we have 200 students for 5 teachers. They can teach 200 students if there is 5 teachers. And case 2. But our head of secondary decided to increase the students, and therefore he wants to increase the teachers as well. So now we have 7 teachers, but we have 300 students. This is insane. Okay, but we can find out the marginal product of labor. This means that when teacher is increased by 2, we know how much students are increased, right? So if you find out the difference in total product, or the difference in the students, this is 300 minus 200, and for labor, we had 5 teachers before, but now we have 7 teachers. So how to efface this? So before we had 5 teachers, but now we have 7 teachers. Okay? So the difference is 100 for total product, and for labor, we have the difference of 2. And if we divide 100 by 50, we have 50 per each teacher or each labor. So which is the marginal product of labor for our school's education capacity. Okay? So we will move on to the next. In your paper 3 exam, I'm not sure, but you may see this. You guys need to insert the specific values for each of them. So first we will start with its average product because it is really easy. So average product, the definition is total product divided by quantity. So we have total product of 2 and we have the labor 1. So 2 over 1 is 2. And for the second labor, we have total product of 7 and we have 2 labors. Therefore, 7 over 2 is 3.5. And now we have 14 for quantity for the third labor. So if we find out the average product, we have 14 over 3. And I will just skip this, 22 over 4, which is 11 over 2. And we can now find out the marginal product. So marginal product, as I mentioned, change in total product divided by change in labor. I will give you a mathematical notation delta here. You guys will learn, I think, I'm not sure for SL students. I don't want to discriminate you guys, but okay, whatever. So delta TP over delta L. This is the formula that I usually use because it is really abbreviated version of this. So this is the same as the one that I wrote there. So this symbol delta means change in. So you want to find out the change of T and change in L, labor. So I never did this, sorry. So since we know the total product is increased from the first labor to second labor by 5, our marginal product has increased by 3, which means 5. I'll explain this again. So labor is increased by 1 for each step, for each section, right? They are increased by 1. Therefore, based on our formula of finding the marginal product of labor, the change in labor is fixed at 1. Therefore, we just need to consider, no, it's 1. You are wrong. Okay, here is a kind of, student. No, it's 1. The change in labor is 1. Let me see. So it is the first labor, right? And this is the non-labor. And this is the second labor, right? So you guys can see the labor has increased by 1. And that's the difference in labor for each step. Therefore, if we find out the change in the total product only to figure out the marginal product of labor, change from the second labor to the first labor for the total product is 5. Okay, so the next one, if we find out the marginal product of this, the third labor, the change is 7, right? And for the fourth labor, we have the change of 8. And here, 6. But now we have a problem. We don't have the total product of labor. But how do we find out this? It is not really hard because we know average product. The definition of the average product is the total product over quantity, right? Therefore, to figure out the total product from the average product is that we just need to multiply by Q and we cancel out the Q and we can find the total product of the labor, which is average product times quantity. So average product for the 6th labor is 5 and the labor is 6. So 5 times 6 is 30. And now we can find out the marginal product for the 6th labor, which is plus 2. For the 7th labor, we have 0 difference. And for the 8th difference, this is very tricky because it is changes from 30 to 28, so it is decreased by 2. So our marginal product of labor for the 8th labor is -2. So now we calculated the number in the table, and if we draw the graph for each table, for each column, we can draw this graph, the product curves. We have 3 different curves. The first one is total product, the black curve, which which is total product curve. And now we have the orange curve, which is marginal product of labor. And we have the blue curve, which is for average product of labor. So, what you need to know is distinguish the features for different curves. First, we will start orange curve, marginal product of labor. So, from the first labor to the fourth labor, it has the feature of increasing rates. So, it starts to increase, right? From the first labor, and it stops to increase at fourth labor, right? But after the fourth labor, it starts to decrease. So this is quite an important feature or attributes you guys should understand. Actually memorize. So, and you can figure out the fourth labor. At the fourth labor, the total product is at maximum, and the marginal product is at maximum, right? And this is actually quite important because in this point, marginal product of labor is maximized. This means that after this point, the law of diminishing returns happen. Okay? Law of diminishing returns. This is the most important terms that you guys must understand, must memorize for your paper 3. Not everything, every paper, but most of paper 3 asks these questions. What is law of diminishing returns, and how you can find out this in this curve? You should be able to draw this curve as well. So this point is where law of diminishing returns happen. Okay? And that is the point where marginal product of labor is maximized. Before this point, marginal product of labor will increase, and after this point, marginal product of labor will decrease. And there is the point that the marginal product of labor crosses the x-axis, which is at the labor of 7. Here, marginal product of labor becomes 0. This means that after this point, marginal product of labor will start to decrease and goes to negative value. This is quite tricky because you guys perhaps didn't know that you can go below the 0. Okay. And we have average product, the blue curve. Average products have a quite different feature with the marginal product curve. So from the labor of 1, it starts to increase to 5. Okay? It starts to increase from 1 to 5. But after this point 5, start to decrease. The reason is that at the point where the labor is 5, the average product of labor is maximized. So this point is where average product of labor is maximized. So what's the feature between the relationship between the average product of labor and the marginal product of labor is that when the average product of labor is maximized, it crosses the marginal product of labor or intersects. So, important observation 1, when APL is equals to marginal product of labor or intersects, average product of labor is maximized or at maximum. Observation 2, when marginal product of labor or MPL is at maximum, law guys need to take notes because this is the most important thing that you should understand for this chapter. And now we will see the feature of the total product of labor. But not here. Okay, let's move on. So as we have seen the curves, we now need to draw this by your hands, not on my own. Because you guys should draw this graph in your paper 3. So you can stop the video a little bit, and you guys can work on yourself, and I will come back later. Okay, so we will start to draw the production curve. I have mentioned already 2 graphs. One is marginal product labor curve, and the other is average product labor curve. So the y-axis we have, it's really hard to see. So we have quantity or output, and for x-axis we have number of labors. Okay, so first we will draw marginal product of labor curve. That is the most important thing usually. So if you draw the marginal product of labor curve, it starts to increase initially, and it starts to decrease after the law of diminishing returns or after the maximum point. And it crosses x-axis and it goes down below the x-axis. Okay, so this is marginal product of labor, and as I mentioned before, the characteristic is that at the maximum, law of diminishing returns happens. You guys need to draw on your hands right now. If you don't draw that, you will lose your mark in your paper 3, and you guys cannot get 7, perhaps 4. Okay. At this point, marginal product of labor becomes 0 when it crosses x-axis. And we will now draw average product of labor. Average product of labor is really tricky, but I will not change my color because this is the only color that you guys can see, so I have no choice. I'm sorry for that, but let's start. So average product of labor first starts to increase when it comes to cross the marginal product of labor curve, and it starts to decrease after this point. Okay. This is my problem drawing skill, but it is maximum. Okay, and this is average product of labor. So here it increase, and here it decrease. Same for marginal product of labor curve or MP curve. I would just say MP curve or AP curve from now on. Okay. And now we draw marginal product of labor curve and APL curve. But I didn't draw TP curve, the total product curve, because it is not usually seen in your paper 3. Of course, you guys can see, but I have different way to draw this. Okay. I will draw this again, and you guys need to draw this again as well, because this is really important practice. You guys should do this in your hands, on your hands. Now we have 2 different coordinates for x and y. For y-axis, we have the quantity, or we have output. For x-axis, we have labor, or number of labors. In your paper 3, you should fully label your graphs. So it should be quantity or output, and this should be labor or number of labors. So if I draw marginal product and AP, it will be like this. And now I want to draw the curve of total product of labor. Okay, I will explain the procedures, and you guys just need to follow this procedure. First, highlight the point where the law of diminishing returns happen, which is where MPL becomes maximum here. Okay. I will just say L, D, R. and draw some dots. And before this portion, the total product of labor will increase at decreasing rates. Increasing rates, something like this. So again, total product labor will increase at increasing rates. So I mean, it will increase gradually and sharply when it closes to this point. And after this point, you will start to increase again, but at increasing rates. Looks like that. And it approaches to the horizontal point. And this is where MP passes the x-axis. When MP is 0, the total product of labor will be maximum. And I will explain the reason after drawing this. And after this part, the total product of labor will start to decrease at increasing rates. So this is the characteristic of product of labor. So here, increase at an increasing rate. And here again, increase but decreasing rates. And here, start to decrease but at increasing rates. Understand? So, and I'll explain the reason why it happens. So what is marginal product of labor and what is total product of labor? So definition of the marginal product of labor is the additional quantity or product that you can produce when there is an additional labor. This means that when I hire Haley as a new labor, I want to know how much she can produce. Or even after, when I hire like Alvin, I want to know how much he can produce by himself. So I have this classroom, but what if I have 30 teachers to teach 12 students? This will be chaotic. We have 20 teachers only for 12 students. We don't have enough class even for teachers to stand up. And that's the problem of why low diminishing returns happen. So we have too many teachers, right? We have too many teachers, but we have so less students. So our productivity starts to decrease at some point of the number of teachers. So for example, when our class have 3 teachers, we can be the best productivity. Our productivity can be the best, the optimum level. However, if there are like 12 teachers, then our productivity of the education will start to decrease, perhaps even be lower than the positive. This means that our education by 12 teachers can negatively affect students. Because it is chaotic. We have too many teachers to teach even just only 12 students. This doesn't work. So that's the reason why marginal product of labor at some point start to decrease because of too many labors. Okay? How about total product of labor? The total product of labor is the sum of the marginal product of labor. So I already used the symbol sigma. I'm absolutely sure that you guys learned in your math class. The sigma is the sum of the marginal product of labor is the total product of labor. Okay? Because it is additional output for additional labor, right? So if we add, like, this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. And for the first labor, we have the quantity of 5. And for the second, we have quantity of 10. Then if we find out the total product for the second labor, we just need to add 5 and 10. Then we can get 15 for the second labor for the total product. So for the second labor, our total product should be 15. Okay? And this is the same. So like, it will be accumulated. You guys perhaps learned in your statistics class that it will be accumulated version. Like you guys will learn the normal distribution curve, And this is actually a cumulative normal distribution curve. We have the probability density function, and we have probability cumulative function, right? That is just like how it works. If you guys are familiar with the math, then this will be easier way to understand. But if you don't understand, there's no problem. So just like I want to explain this as much as possible, as deep as possible, as profound as possible. Yeah, whatever. Let's move on. So, law of diminishing returns. One of the most important law you guys should memorize and understand why it happens. Okay, in the short run, MP and AP decreases. Why? Because we have too many variables. I found the problem. If you guys watch it, the review part, when I start this, you guys should change variable as resources. Okay, again, factors of production is same as input, and input or factors of production is same as resources, not variables. I made a mistake. Okay, so our variable resources are limited. Oh, not limited. Because they can be changed easily, like labor or capital. We can give unlimited computers to teachers. We can have unlimited students and teachers if we have money. However, we cannot buy unlimited number of land, even if we have a lot of money, because we need to make a new contract. We need a long time to change this. We should have a time to change our variable land. Resource land. Therefore, land is fixed variable. However, labor and capital is variable resources or variable input. So I already mentioned the problem of the labor when we have too many teachers. Okay, because we have fixed number of fixed resources, we have a limited number of fixed resources. If there are too many variable resources, then marginal product and average product will start to decrease in the short run only. The reason is that because the fixed input only works when it is in the short run. When our economy is in the long run, there is no fixed input. Every variable can change it, and that is the definition of the long run. And therefore, law of diminishing returns are not observed if we are in the long run.